Welcome to Big Blend Radio Success Express Show, where we talk about business, leadership, and career development. Welcome, everyone. You know, we're so excited to have Lea Brovedani back in her Trust Talk with Lea segment here on Big Blend Radio Success Express Show. She's here every third Thursday. She's done this for a number of years. And then we did a little detour as she became a death doula, end-of-life midwife death doula, with a show called Soul Journey Doula. Well, that's her website, souljourneydoula.com. And that really does go with being a trust leader. And Lea is a speaker, a workshop facilitator on trust. She's recognized as a top thought leader on trust by the organization Trust Across America. She's the author of Trust Me, Restore Belief and Confidence in an Uncertain World. We all need that right now. Also, she wrote Trusted, Secret Lessons from an Inspired Leader. And so we're getting back into this. She's done the death doula jaunt, but that is part of her work in emotional intelligence. So it's really cool because if, you know, you're planning your end of life and you have someone nearby you that can help you with that, that's what she does. And that person better, you know, have trust in you to do that. And trust is all about life. And so today we're going to revisit her 5 tenets of trust, which is caring, commitment, consistency, competence, and communication. So you can go to her website, thetrustarchitect.biz. So welcome back, Trust Architect Lea. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. Thank you.
So I love this. We're going back to talking trust, but I feel like in all the end of life conversations we had with the Soul Journey Doula podcast, that trust was like the core part of that. And it does tie into your work as a trust leader.
It really does. You know, I can't imagine being able to do the work as an end of life doula if people didn't trust me. And so all of the tenets of trust that I've written about that are part of my model were always part of the work that I did as an end-of-life doula.
Yeah, and then at the same time, when I go back into those podcasts, and everyone, I'll link that in the episode notes so you can listen to them because they're timeless, literally. There's so much information there on planning, but planning your end of life, but it's also about living your best life. And that's something we talk about a lot on that podcast. So I love, number one, I just want to say I love that you don't stop growing as a leader in what you do as a trust architect. It's, you know, by going and, you know, getting certified in end of life planning and being the death doula, I think that shows your commitment in what you do as a trust leader. Is that part of why you do that? It's like, hey, I'm interested in this. This is also part of emotional intelligence. Let me go for it and expand my knowledge.
And I don't think that there is ever a point in my life where I won't want to continue growing and learning and because things change. Like when I started studying emotional intelligence, that was in 1999. Whoa, like a lifetime ago. And what happened, like all of the developments that have happened since then, if you want to keep your expertise, then you need to continually change and grow. That's part of the whole thing of being trusted, is that people know that if you're talking to them, your skills are, you know, like you're keeping up to date.
Yeah, that's being consistent, you know, and
competent.
When you think about, competence, we're talking all, you know, 5 tenets here. And, you know, even as a death doula, you have the pillars in there too, you know, the pillars of caring, and they really go hand in hand. But also when you look back to 1999, now I've got that song in there from Prince stuck in my head. Thank you. No, I'm going to have to listen to Prince after this. But the thing too, when you think about from 1999, because I think back to us as Big Blend started in 97 and the changes that have happened, you know, we've been reflecting on this quite a bit. I mean, it kind of 18 years of podcasting is pretty insane when you think about it, that it's a norm now. And some people are only now starting to do it, which is great. You know, do it. It's so cool. It's a way to really connect with your audience, and a new audience that may be interested in what you do, and do it from a personal story. I mean, we sell advertising as publication people, but there's something where it's from the horse's mouth. I'm not calling you a horse, but you know what I mean, where it's from somebody telling their story, is so important. But when I think at the difference of how we changed, the internet changed everything in communication. 97, we had people were getting websites, but we didn't have Google. We had those big, thick books on Netscape. Remember Netscape, anybody? Some of our listeners probably have no clue what I'm talking about, and that's okay. It's something of the past. But we've also had a massive generational change. And so the workforce is a younger generation. I mean, obviously, we always have younger generations in the workforce, but it's a whole era change over. So is that something that you deal with as a trust leader, the trust architect, that communication, I know, is one of your tenets, but communication changes in regards to a generational change, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I have to say that that is such a big field that I know friends of mine who are speakers, they specialize in cross-generational communication. And that in itself is a huge field. So I love learning from them. And I wouldn't
Mm,
even pretend to be an expert on all of the ways that it's changed. But I do know that the way we communicate, when I started, I said, whenever possible, if you're trying to communicate with someone face to face, and if you can't do face to face, then you can do text or phone. And if you can't do phone, then you do text. And if you can't do text and all of that, and that just isn't, that's not what is happening right now. A lot of
mm,
times, the way people communicate first, especially if they're younger, is before they do face to face, they're doing text or they're doing,
mhm.
it's just the rules that I used to have don't apply anymore.
Oh, yeah, Nancy and I talk about this too, where it used to be, pick up the phone and call someone. And like, there's some areas in this country that still live by that, which I love, because I feel like you're actually gonna, it's like, we're doing business. Let's just make a phone call. But if someone doesn't have you programmed into your phone, how do you make that phone call, that first phone call? You're ignored. Sometimes you have to text somebody before you'll be able to make a phone call. And it's just this whole, it, it, it's really changed. I mean, even hotel bookings, you've got self check-in now. You go put your phone up to a little screen and you're beamed up into your room. And you could have a
Yeah.
little mini robot serve you a cocktail. I mean, so it's kind of, and now we are also in the world of ghosting, which I think is absolutely horrific to me. Ghosting is one of the worst things in communication from all sides, is just disappearing, right? So that is something where I think trust is a two-way street as well, where if someone ghosts you, right, in business or personal, it's actually quite cruel when people don't know why.
Yeah. And so for people who are just tuning in, I mean, you mentioned all of the five tenets of caring, which are caring, commitment, consistency, competence, and communication. And ghosting, if you look at caring, where does that fit into the care?
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't. That's like, the only thing that if you were to visualize it, ghosting is kind of standing in front of someone, and when they talk to you, you turn your back.
Hmm.
And that's the visual that I get. And so, how is that related to caring? So, we trust people that we know genuinely care about us. And
Hmm.
what does that look like?
Yeah. And you actually see that too with in the business world, you see people break up with people that way.
Oh,
They
yeah.
just disappear. I'm like, you babies. It kind of is high school, isn't it? That kind of behavior to me. But I've seen it professionally happen where there's just the big disappear, which I think is just horrific to me. It's like, even if it's, between a client and a um, the person they're hiring, you have the person with the services, and then you have their um, their client, and it should be a two-way street. So let me put it this way. So like we just did a tourism seminar, not a seminar, a podcast about sustainable tourism. And so it's about the destinations becoming more eco-friendly for
Okay.
their community, right? For their community. And so that like Park City, Utah, is up there for having the Winter Olympics. And they said like, this is how it's going to run for our community because Park City is now known as being a mountain kind destination, which means you are not driving into town. You're going to take a shuttle from the airport because you don't need your car when you get there. They don't want all these extra fumes. This is how we live. This is how our practices are as a community to keep it clean, healthy, protect the natural wonders that they have and the
Okay.
history. So they're training their travelers to come in so that the community that lives there, they live in harmony, right? Temporary harmony when someone comes in. Because a lot of
And
people move there. So, and they told the Olympics, we won't have the Olympics unless you abide by our rules. They were willing to drop it and not have the Winter Olympics there. And so,
oh, I
like,
love
they're not
that.
saying, so this is why I say it's a two-way street is that we can't talk about tourism and the destinations being clean and green. The travelers also have to abide by being the guest in this place.
And
And
see,
and
for
that
me,
is and for years it hasn't been that way. It's whatever the guest wants, the guest gets, which
yeah.
annoys the actual community where the is a destination, the people who live there.
And to
So
me, yeah, that is just a perfect example. If you say you care about the environment, that is trust in action. They're saying, yes, we care about the environment, and here's how we prove it because they're actually showing, like they're walking their talk, they-
mhm,
which is perfect. It's one of the first tenets of trust.
exactly. That is being it's integrity to their
Yeah.
community. And being able to say this is the only way, otherwise we're not, because then they're willing to lose it because their care for their community, their care for the land, the care for everything is for, and so, but they got it. They're the first ones to have these rules in the Olympics. So yeah, I think integrity is something really importantly when it comes to trust that
Yeah.
you're doing the right thing. It's like doing the right thing when no one's watching.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. You honor your commitments, big or small. And if you can't, you get back to the person and let them know why and get them to release you from that commitment. That's part of it. That the integrity is just being able to be constant. And if you can't do something, let the person know instead of just going, oh, well, it doesn't work out.
Mm. Yeah, and this is where commitment, consistency, right? The
Yeah.
consistency that really builds trust. But then, you could have been consistent for a year on something and then one day you flubbed up.
Oh, God,
And
that's human.
yeah, oh, we get to be human. Yay.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Well, it depends on how you handle it, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's the thing. And I think being honest is like you can mess up. Everybody messes up. Everyone at some
Yeah.
point messes up, but it doesn't mean that you ruin if you've been consistent for a year on something and then you have a blunder, you can get back on that horse and ride pretty quickly if you
Yeah.
face the music quickly, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when I was years ago, I was an HR manager, and if you'd see people that did a great job one day and the next day it was complete crap, then I would get curious because sometimes you find out that a person is going through something that's happening in their personal life that you find out, or sometimes the person would have an addictions issue. And
Mm,
so there's so much more. Instead of making these blanket judgments, if you want people to trust you, then you have to be curious instead of rushing to judgment.
hmm Exactly. They're rushing to judgment. Yeah. And HR, talk about changing. I mean, that's a huge change right now.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
what's happening in the workforce. DEI is a whole other thing. And so it's kind of like, I think you have to, that it's the integrity of the company in HR about what you put forward, what is best for the company, right? And when you talk
Yeah.
about those kind of relationships, what is expected. And it actually doesn't, and everyone has to obey employment law, right? We do a lot on employment law and HR here on Big Blend. But if the company message is consistent and has
Yeah.
integrity, then no matter what changes legally, and if it's got the best interest of the company and the best interest of the employees, and you stay consistent with that, no matter what changes in the world, that should help float the boat and keep going, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And um, there's a lot of talk around work-life balance and everything. But if that's one of the things that you promote as part of your company, but then the leader preaches that, but emails their employees at midnight, then trust diminishes. And they, like, and if they're going to do that, then explain why. Because I know some people who say, oh, if I didn't write it down right away, I would have forgotten. Well, if that's the case, then you say to your employees, listen, when I get an idea, I'm going to write it down. I don't want you to respond to me until the next day, whatever. But if what you're saying is one thing, but your actions are saying something else, then that's a trust breach.
Mm, yeah, that's true. Because who are you then?
Yeah.
You know, the elusive boss. What are they going to do today?
Yeah.
That gives a feeling of uncertainty when you don't. If you're, I mean, if you could be a boss that's yelling all the time, then you get to know that's a person who yells all the time, and you can
Yeah.
kind of handle it if you want to, right? Or
Yeah.
find a new place. But
You
once
can
you know if
trust
they're
them because you
consistent,
know that that's who they are.
yeah, if they're a consistent yeller, then
Yeah.
they're a consistent yeller, and you go, all right, they're yelling again, and maybe that's just who they are, and it doesn't mean anything to do with you even, unless they are always yelling at you. Then I would say you better change something or get the heck out.
Yeah. But yeah, Lisa, let's be honest. If that was you and I, we would probably swear at them.
Yeah, exactly. And then leave and slam the door, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
hope to hell that you didn't leave your cell phone in the office and have to go back
exactly.
and
Or
get it. You're
find a
like,
way to
where's my
get it. Yeah.
phone? And you do a check and it's like, damn it, I just slammed the door and told them where to go. You you can't that's it. It's all over.
And
But
then you
yeah, I
have to
think
open the door again and say, and I'm going to slam the door again, but I need to get my phone.
I know exactly. I'd get the giggles if that happened. I would.
Yeah.
I would get the giggles. Because anger doesn't last very long either.
No, no.
Unless you want to sit with it, then yeah, you're going to be sick. Um, yeah, but this consistency, I think, is super important, whatever the behavior is, because then you can trust that.
Yeah.
And and they say about, make hay when the sun shines. And I think, times where things are going really well in a company, that's when you really need to set those priorities and some of the rules, and so that there's a consistency with that, so it's not when everything goes wrong and things happen, because things do go wrong, right, in the world, and that can affect a company or an organization and individuals. But if you had those rules set up first, because aren't rules like boundaries important in some
Yeah.
things?
If people know what they are, but and that is my big caveat is that yes, rules are important if people understand and people can reach consensus on them. And I'm not saying that you have to have rules and then all the employees have to agree because that doesn't make sense a lot of times. If there's safety, if you're in a company that has, I've worked for or given presentations for companies that have a lot of dangerous things that they do. And the safety rules are there for a reason. And so you can't just say, well, if you don't agree with these rules, that's okay. There has to be reasons for things and they have to be consistent for everybody. So it can't be okay for someone to show up in their runners if what you've told is that they have to wear steel-toed shoes or steel-toed boots because you
Mm.
say, well, this person, like I might be belaboring a silly point, but the rules have to make sense and they have to be for everyone.
Mm. And then you be consistent in the message. You don't just tell the rules once and drop it off, and
Exactly.
forget about it. That has to be part of the dialogue.
Yeah.
So it's there. Everybody knows. Everybody's on so that's the consistency comes back and the communication comes back
Yeah.
into play. Yeah.
Transparent communication, open communication, so
Mhm.
that you're not, it prevents a lot of the rumors and the gossip and misunderstandings.
Mm. Now, Lee, I know you're about to set sail.
Yeah.
And I know you do, conferences at sea. This is awesome. Well, she does seminars and workshops at sea. You're gone for 3 weeks.
It's a transatlantic cruise on NCL, and I'm doing 8 different presentations while I'm there. So we're sailing from Rio de Janeiro to Lisbon, Portugal, which is really cool
Mm.
because the rest of the time when I'm not lecturing, I get to be just have this wonderful cruise and interact and have fun. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So you're doing 8 different presentations. So that's for people to know. Can you give us kind of a overview of what you'll be teaching? Because I think this is really cool. You can go on a cruise and then get some personal and professional development while you're there too. While you're in a relaxed state, you tend to maybe take in some of this information at a little bit of a better way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of follows with the stuff you and we've talked about. So I'm talking about understanding emotions and, the universal language and how to actually, because we're traveling to a lot of different cultures, that we talk about emotional intelligence is universal, but how we present them is
Mm.
very cultural. So it's acceptable in some Latin countries to give a kiss on both sides of the cheeks.
Mm.
And that might not be acceptable in different cultures. So understanding emotions as a universal language and then being able to recognizing a con because
Oh.
how to spot whether or not someone's trustworthy.
Mm.
So that
Yeah,
kind
that's
of goes
big.
along with, yeah, understanding emotions and how to recognize if you're being conned. If you're
Mm.
in relationships, either professional or personal, rebuilding trust, because if you've never made a mistake, then you're not human. We all make mistakes, but knowing how to rebuild trust. And
Yeah, that's a big one.
yeah, there's this whole thing that, it takes a lifetime to build trust and only a moment to break it. Well, that's just not true. What people are talking about there is reputation. So understanding what trust is, and then I get into that. And then busting common trust myths. And I just said one. It takes a lifetime to build trust and only a minute to break it. That's a myth. And I
Mm.
get into some other common trust myths. And then being able to master emotional intelligence for better
Ooh.
communication. So being able to actually use what you know about emotional intelligence. I talk about the 5 tenets of trust as a
Awesome.
framework so people understand what that is. And then talking about if emotions are universal, why can they be so hard to read? Like
Mm.
we talk about being able to read people's emotions. Well, why can't we always read emotions? And
Mm.
I go into how you actually can get beyond that and understand it. And then the trust rule book
Mm.
and what are kind of some of the rules of trust. So those are the 8 presentations that I'm doing on board the cruise ship. So I'm really
Oh.
excited about it.
Now I know that you do these different presentations sometimes like at sea like you're doing, but for different workshops for different companies
Yeah.
according to what they need. So do they have to do all 8 when that kind of thing happens, or do you do a
Oh
specific
Lord,
one if
no.
the company calls you?
No, normally it is like this is going to be a lot. So normally I would do one presentation. It's an hour presentation that you do at a conference, depending on what the conference needs. So,
Mm,
a lot of times if I'm speaking at a conference, they already have a theme. And so it is using what I know to work into the theme of the conference that they're having and what the attendees need and
mm,
what is useful for them because it might not be a conference where people have to recognize when they're being conned because that doesn't fall into what they need to learn in that moment. So no,
mm,
I usually do one presentation and it really depends on what they want.
mm. Do you do presentations via Zoom with everyone doing so much,
Yeah.
globally, remotely? And I think that's the other thing about, finding out if you're being conned, and the communication now is with everyone being, not everyone, I shouldn't generalize like that, but a lot of people working remotely, that's a whole other world. And that's another
Yeah.
one of those big changes. I think this conversation is really about change since the late 1990s, to now how much has changed in almost 30 years, 25 to 30 years of
Oh,
how
yeah.
our workforce has changed. I mean, look, we got different cars now too. Who knows where that's going to go? But, yeah, it's a whole different world, y'all. Every election brings different change too. And that's a whole other, interesting thing in workforces of, political, drama too. People
Oh my gosh,
quit
yeah.
jobs because maybe they're working for someone who is of an opposite party, and all parties are, dealing with this. So, it's kind of an interesting world of how far this goes and how to have emotional intelligence where if something isn't going your way, how to take a deep breath and maybe look at it in a different light and not be reactive. So there's so much that you're doing that is super cool, but we are in a world where we're zooming here and there. And
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think we're Skyping anymore. I think that just got tanked too.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I don't even know if you can Skype anymore.
no, I think they just said, that's it, I'm out. Yeah.
Yeah. And during in 2020, we had as a professional speaker, and this is an overused term, but we had to pivot very quickly
Mm,
because conferences, a lot of them were canceled and then they quit canceling them and they put them all on the internet. And so you had to do a full presentation on Zoom or whatever platform that you use. Sometimes it was,
yeah.
I think there was 5 different platforms that I had to learn at one point. And
Mm,
honestly, I found that like I got proficient at it, but you need to learn how to present. And if you're used to getting your energy from your audience because you're used to doing it face to face, when you're presenting to a screen, you have to find a way to get all of that excitement from
mm.
somewhere else. So yeah,
That's
I've done both.
that's interesting because yeah, we do, we've come from a live podcast background, all audio. Now we do audio and video recorded live, and the live is always exciting to me. And then when things don't go wrong, I'm like, dang it. And it's a little bit saltier than that when I say it because you're ready for it. Anything can happen. People could say something they weren't supposed to, and you're like almost waiting for it and, silently hoping for it. And because it's fun, but there's an
Yeah.
energy with live, just even in podcasting, that is amazing, and doing it remotely live. We've done so many tourism podcasts, like from bed and breakfast. I remember one we did, I think it was the Hummingbird Inn were we in Delaware or Maryland? I think it was Maryland. I'm going to get it wrong. Was it Maryland? The Hummingbird Inn, Easton, Maryland, or Easton, Delaware. It's Easton anyway. It's this Victorian mansion. And we have our pink sock monkey, Priscilla, who's our mascot. And it was October, and the whole place was done up for Halloween. So we were like, this is super cool. So we were in the top turret. doing our podcast, looking down, and then we were playing with Priscilla, hanging her out the window. Anyway, just saying the live stuff like that is just, even though the audience is not in the place, you start to act that way. And it's a different, and the innkeeper was calling in from the kitchen downstairs, and it's just this whole like live energy, which is so different. And the same for musicians, had to go from performing live in front of an audience, and they feed off of the audience. It's an energy exchange, and to Zoom. And, I think just about every musician I've talked to is like, thank God we're back out, and it sucked. But conferences changed that started to change because of September 11th. Remember that?
Oh,
that changed a lot of what was happening in regards to people getting into, that changed the world. So there's just been so many changes, and that's not going away. That is something you can bank on, is that change will always happen. That's the one, if you want a consistent, constant, bet on change. It's always going to happen. And whether you like it or not,
If you want to stay relevant, you have to learn and stay on top of some of those changes. So, that's just part of it. In order to be competent, you have to constantly change. So,
well, I love this. I love that you're going to sail and do all of these presentations. It's going to be fun. You get to go to Lisbon. Oh my gosh, I've always wanted to go to Lisbon. They have wonderful music there, the fado music. And Port. Yeah. That's port and brownies. You can't beat that.
Oh my God.
Good. That's the good stuff in life. But,
so we'll have to get together personally so that we can actually enjoy the port. And brownies.
We'll see you soon. You'll see you soon. We love it. Well, listen, safe travels. Everyone, Lea is back here talking trust every third Thursday on Big Blend Radio, and excited to delve into some more of these. We're actually going to follow some of these conversations, or I should say presentations she's doing at SEA. We're going to be communicating on the show about some of these. And I really want to get into understanding emotions, because I think the world has had a lot of fiery, people are upset around the world on all kinds of things. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And to continue your work life, sometimes when there's, if there's distrust, when their emotions are in a negative, it's very hard to be productive. And so emotional intelligence, I think, is an important conversation to, understand emotions and then how to handle them to move forward.
Yeah.
And there's always a brighter side.
On the ship. So I'll keep in touch. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I'll keep in touch, Lisa, and we'll see if maybe we can do a podcast while I'm
floating podcast.
Yeah.
While you're having port.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm in that. Okay. We'll have a wine time, with Lea at SEA. Okay. When you get to Lisbon, let's do it when you dock in Lisbon. Let's do a port. We'll do a porter call. That's so lame. That was sick. Everyone, thanks for joining us. I promise not to say that again, but I will. Keep up with Lea at thetrustarchitect.biz or go to leabrovedani.com. Thanks so much, Lea. It's been super fun.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio Success Express Show. This show is brought to you by Big Blend Magazines. You can keep up with us at bigblendradio.com and check out our magazines at blendradioandtv.com.